Right. Good morning or hello if you are not in a time zone that it's morning for you. And let's start the meeting. So last week, I guess we spoke about various items in our agenda, and I would like to actually follow up on those. There are a couple of things that we have been working on, and we would like to see the status of them today. Let me just open this. All right, so one is equivalence cache. So I don't know if Harry is here. Harry is not. Yeah, it's not the perfect timing, I guess, for guys in China. So I don't know what is the latest update on that equivalence cache. Harry has a new PR for equivalence cache, improvement in the equivalence cache, but I feel like we need to redesign the architecture a little bit, because now equivalence cache in Harry's most recent PR knows about the logic in predicates, which seems a little bit risky to me, because if changes happen to the predicates, then equivalence cache logic may get outdated and not reflect the most recent version of predicates. So basically, whoever changes anything in predicates has to know that there is something in equivalence cache as well, and go and change those too. That's why I think we need to think a little differently about how to implement it. But anyway, that's going forward. Tainting node by condition, that one is graduated to beta. The PR is merged, and I think we are good to go there. Gang scheduling, of course, Klaus is not here today. There are a few comments on gang scheduling. It's moving forward. I think we are there pretty much with the API design. I have some idea about whether we want to pass some sort of an ID to instances of a gang so that they know their member ID. This is actually a much bigger and longer discussion, because right now our design is a little different. Basically, the gang today is not an object. Well, it's an object, but it doesn't have pods of its own. Pods belong to other collections, and gang just specifies the properties of a gang, like the number of members or the life cycle policies of a gang. We need to think a little differently if we want to add IDs to instances of a gang. Maybe we need to change some of the other controllers to support this. But anyway, this is something that we are gonna do. And we are gonna discuss it and see if there is anything that we want to change there. Yeah. So with respect to next item is the scheduling framework. I've updated the scheduling framework with some of the like minor changes here and there. Feel free to take another look, comment if you have any comments or question. Image locality, again, Harry is not here. So image locality priority function is out there. It's enabled by default. We are trying to enable end-to-end cache for image locality, but we are running into permission issues in pushing the images. I've tried to reach Jeff, who has permission to push these images. He was not responsive. Maybe he's on vacation or something. But anyways, I will try to reach out to him again to see if he can help us push these images. Yeah, next item, pod scheduling policies. For pod scheduling policies, we have had some discussions with Yasin and Tim Allclair. We think, I also have commented on a PR for the scheduling policy. We are almost there, but there are some different opinions about how to create the matchers and the policy matching against pods. most of these are like details, like how the matcher should have like a hot selector, and whether we want to end the policy rules or the policy rules here and there. So there are some of these details that we are trying to hash out. I don't want to go into all the details here, but if you're interested, you can take a look at the PR. It's not finalized yet, so we still need to work on the details here. All right, so next item is daemon set scheduling by default scheduler. Daemon set scheduling is going forward. We are hoping that we can enable it in 1.12. We think that all the problems that we are aware of are addressed already. So hopefully we can enable it very soon, in the next few days. Okay, next item that I would like to hear about is the descheduler. We haven't heard any updates from folks, Red Hat folks. Ravi, you are here. I don't know if, no, I don't see. I don't.
Yeah, Avish is not here, I believe. But yes, we are ready to make it as official add-on with the existing strategies. I will go through the procedure for how to create the container image and push it to Google Container Registry.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Is there anything that needs review, or you guys want us to take a look at anything? Is there any concern about like backward compatibility or any of these concerns?
With respect to descheduler?
Yes.
To be clear, the question is when it replaces rescheduler, or in general, if you want to push it descheduler as an add-on component? Yeah,
I don't consider this as a replacement for rescheduler. We basically don't need rescheduler anymore. So this is basically a new add-on for Kubernetes. My question is that when we add this new component to Kubernetes, is there any concerns of backward compatibility or any other concern? Is there any area that we need to look at?
Nothing as far as I know, because it is a separate entity and this needs to run as a job or something, like either job or cron job or some way, which is like external to core Kubernetes.
Right. And by the way, how does it work with RBAC?
Yes, so it uses a particular service account, and that service account needs to have some privileges, especially on the pod resource. We need to have evict as the verb that is needed. The documentation on descheduler page shows a sample service account, how to use it, and along with the privileges that are needed for it.
Okay, sounds good, thanks. Let's see. Next item is scheduling or scoring fewer nodes or finding fewer feasible nodes in a cluster to improve performance of the scheduler. So I actually last week when I was thinking about how to proceed with this PR, I felt like we don't need to wait for the next release to enable it. We can actually enable it starting next release, 1.12. And in my PR, I actually changed the default value of the CLI or the config option to 50%. So by default, basically, scheduler stops looking for more feasible nodes as soon as it finds 50% of the cluster feasible, or 50% of nodes of the total size of the cluster feasible. So scheduler stops at that point and starts scoring nodes. I think we are going forward with that in 1.12, but we will know better after we merge this PR. We may still change our plans before 1.12 is released, but that's what we think we should go forward with at this point. The performance improvement that we have seen with these numbers is about 23% or so of performance improvement in our benchmarks. So we will see how much it improves performance in the overall end-to-end execution of the scalability tests. Yes.
Yep. Bobby, regarding the enabling of image plugin, image locality plugin with the performance PR that you have, I'm not sure it would have any impact on that, because if you're scoring only 50% of the nodes, will that cause any skew for the distribution of images?
Why should it cause skew in distribution?
Say if we are concentrating only on the first 50% of the nodes.
That's not what we do. That's not what we do. Actually, the way that I've implemented this feature is that scheduler starts scanning nodes,
right,
and once it stops, it actually, for the next part, it continues from the point that it does stop. So it's not like just keeps scoring only the first 50%.
I forgot about that. Sorry, I remember it now. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Bobby, quick question.
Yes.
Is there any randomness there, or is it a sequential scan?
So there is, in a way, some randomness, but not much really. So what we do is this. So we have a new structure called node tree. A node tree is similar to like a tree structure, like a tree data structure. You can think of it as a tree with the height of 2. So root is root, not important, but let's say the first level children of this tree are zones of a cluster, and then under each zone there are like a few nodes. So the way that we start scoring nodes is that we start from, let's say, zone 1, we go score the first node, and then we go to the next zone, we score the first node, and so on until the zones are exhausted. And then we come back to the first zone again, we score the second node. And this is how the iterator works. So it's not random that way, but it actually goes through all the zones and all the nodes. And it continues from the point that it stopped in the previous scheduling cycle.
How many zones do we have typically?
Depends on the cluster, really. So some clusters have several zones, some clusters have only one zone.
If it has only one zone, then it's kind of sequential.
Yes, it's sequential in that case, but it never starts from the beginning again, right? So basically, if you score, let's say, the first 50 nodes for the first pod, it starts from node 51 for the second pod, and so on, and then it goes in a round-robin way. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess you have any performance results attached to the PR?
Yes.
Take a look.
So, Bobby, is it alpha feature in 112?
You said this feature is our feature in 112?
Yeah, I mean the score fewer nodes is disabled by default or enabled by default in 112?
Yeah, so that's what I was just trying to explain. So I initially didn't want to enable scoring of fewer nodes in 112, but I thought there would not be any point in not enabling it. It's not going to be exercise if we don't enable it, and then enabling it later is not going to make a lot of sense. So I thought, yes, we are going to go ahead and enable it in 112 unless we run into any issues earlier during our test, or if people find any issues.
Sorry for the question, but if only one node in the entire cluster has room for the pod, then every node gets evaluated?
Yes. So actually, if there are less than 50 nodes in the cluster, because that's like the number that we put there as a constant. If there are less than 50 nodes feasible in the cluster, then all the nodes are evaluated. And this basically is similar to what we used to do before this PR.
Okay, so it's not a feature gate thing or something. It's just
No.
enabled by default. Okay.
No, I intentionally didn't put it in behind a feature gate. I don't know. I am not a huge fan of all the feature gates that we have. Sometimes they are just delaying or basically rollouts. Some of these features are not fundamentally changing anything. Some of them have API, and we need to have like backward compatibility or changing major behavior in the scheduler or other components. I agree with putting some of those behind feature gates, but for this particular one, I didn't feel like we really need to put it behind a feature gate. And actually, if we basically set the config option to 100, which means 100% of the nodes are going to be scored every time, then it's essentially the same behavior as we had before this PR.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bobby, the number of nodes, 50, you mentioned in a cluster, is that configurable or is that kind of a hard-coded?
So the part that is configurable is a percentage. So you can specify what percentage of nodes should be, not what percentage of nodes should be scored. Basically, you specify when to stop once you find what percentage of nodes feasible. So let's say that in a cluster that is overloaded, you put like 10%, but this 10% means that stop once you find 10% of the nodes feasible. And if there is no node feasible, every node is in the cluster is going to be scanned, right? So it's a little different, but we also have a constant that is 50 nodes.
Okay,
That's constant, right? So if you set this configurable value to 10% and your cluster is 200 nodes, it means stop once you have 20 nodes feasible. But we are not going to do that. We're still going to go ahead and scan the whole cluster or a larger portion of the cluster, because we still expect at least 50% of nodes to be found feasible. So this feature is not going to impact small clusters at all.
Okay, so the 50 number is constant basically.
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right. Because yes, there's
Fine. So are you also using any caching of scores?
Caching of what?
Of scores? Do you remember the previous scores, or do you discard all the previous scores?
So I guess you're talking about equivalence cache, basically, that we are working on. This results that I was telling you is not related. Well, we don't care about equivalence cache. This is apart from equivalence cache. But that's another effort that we are trying to pursue. So far, what we've seen is that equivalence cache doesn't improve performance in all cases. It helps with more sophisticated predicates, but for like simple, fast predicates, it actually can hurt performance. But anyway, that's sort of like orthogonal to this PR.
I think he was mentioning about scores. Madhukar was asking about scores, which happens during the priority stage.
Yeah, so
the cache we have is for predicate.
Yeah, so I don't know if Madhukar, do you actually mean by score or feasibility? Yeah, so equivalent, Rob is right. Equivalence cache helps us basically cache the results of predicate functions, not priority functions. But I don't know how you use the scoring. I sometimes use the scoring as a combination of predicate and priority functions together. But depends on what you mean by scoring. So we don't cache the scores basically of any nodes.
Yeah.
So I kind of meant both of them. Like if you have similar pods coming, then do you remember previous scores or?
Yeah. So we only cache the results of predicates, not priority functions.
Okay.
Basically, only the filtering results is cached, not the scores, or the priority functions are not cached.
That can be another way to improve performance, but that can be later.
Yeah, so that, as I said, that is another effort that we're trying to work on. So hopefully that will result in performance improvement. So far, we haven't seen a lot of performance improvement from the cache for simple predicates. All right. Jonathan, you were working on some stuff. Do you want to give us an update about your plans for
Refactoring?
Yeah.
Sure. Hello. I have been, I've actually been pretty busy on other projects lately, so I haven't been making it to a lot of these meetings, but I have been sort of talking with Bobby about our developer velocity on the scheduler, and so I've come up with a list of things that I think are slowing us down. This is related to my last couple emails about explaining how the scheduler works today. So I'm putting together a proposal for refactoring several packages within the scheduler. And once that gets mailed out, we can discuss that. And then my hope is to file a whole bunch of help wanted issues, break it up into smaller pieces, and we can get there's a lot of contributors sort of waiting for us to give them something small to do. So that's a good way to get some value out of those contributors. And yeah, and the plan is not meant to be like a all or nothing. I think we could, maybe have unanimous agreement on some parts and lengthy discussions on other parts.
Right.
So yeah, I'll try to carve it up into independent chunks. But the details will go out later on.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. Okay. Since Wei is here, Wei, do you have any further updates for us with respect to any of the projects that you were working on, even scheduling or tainting nodes?
So one issue is that, as we discussed in last week, the default schedule doesn't respec taint when it's gonna to schedule the daemon size part, and I made a fix, and that one got merged. And another PR was merged yesterday is that in some very common cases, that if the path has host network equals true, in some corner cases, the path will keep increasing. That means the default scheduler doesn't guard the scheduling of the path properly. So the path gets out of control of default scheduler and keep increasing the number. And it's like a pod explosion. And that was a bug in the 110 when we have a PR to refactoring the host path information, the data structure. So the data structure was changed from a map string bool to mapping map data structure. So when we clone the data structure, we need to be careful because the inside map should also be deep clone. So that's
Yeah, that was actually a good find. Thank you for finding and fixing that issue. Actually, we had seen a couple of instances that ports were not assigned correctly, or we've given like when a node was out of ports, we tried to schedule pods and stuff like that. And I suspect that some of these issues might be caused by this issue in the code. I'm glad that you found it. Thanks.
I think that's pretty much by me.
Yeah. All right. So is there any other questions or comments? Any updates on projects that people are working on? If not, we can end the meeting a few minutes early.
Just hi, Bob.
Yes, I did.
Hi. So we started just quick update. I know we have only a few minutes left, but I just wanted to pick your brain, everybody's brain. So there are two things we're looking at. So we done with the performance and all the firmament Poseidon thing and all that. And now what we are trying to do is make sure we can coexist with the default scheduler. The firmament can coexist as the alternate scheduler. So there are two problems. One problem is firmament is breaking, and we ran all the Kubernetes end-to-end cases, and a lot of storage SIG test cases and networking test cases are failing. So we need to get to the bottom of that. So essentially that's like a firmament side of the equation, means we are breaking things. So we need to resolve all those. So that's one thing. The other thing is Kubernetes default scheduler can break firmament. For example, the priority preemption thing can preempt something, and firmament doesn't know anything about it, and so it goes crazy basically. So now, and then the max number of pods in a node as well. So when we have implemented the same thing in firmament also, that you cannot have more than 100 pods in a node, just like default scheduler does.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is when we do that, what if they're already pods scheduled by the default scheduler? So then you will overload the system. So that part gets very complex actually. The whole coexistence from that perspective.
So one question is that doesn't Firmament, similar to our default scheduler, get updates about pods that are scheduled?
Yeah. So we have a knowledge base. So we store everything, whatever we process, we store everything in a knowledge base actually. You see, the Firmament does. Okay.
Sure. So why do you say that Firmament will not know that another?
Well, the Firmament doesn't know the pods processed by default scheduler. Firmament only knows pods processed by the Firmament scheduler.
Why not? So you don't have something similar to our informers that tell?
Well, yeah. So we will have to do that. You see, if you want to do that. So currently our knowledge base consists of the cluster state, which is processed by Firmament.
Right. So actually, it's not completely impossible to replace the default scheduler with something else. We just need to make sure that another scheduler, like Firmament or any other scheduler that is going to replace the default scheduler, schedules daemon set pods, for example, that we are going to schedule them by default scheduler. You need to make sure that those daemon set pods are scheduled properly by the replacement scheduler. And that should be pretty much it. Otherwise, I guess another scheduler can be a replacement. That said, one thing to keep in mind is that in Kubernetes, we always design the system so that multiple schedulers can coexist. So pods can, for example, have scheduler name to specify which scheduler they would like to be scheduled with.
But that's problematic though, because if the nodes are shared by both the schedulers, then the whole thing gets all screwed up. Remember the number of pods, because the second alternate scheduler doesn't know what the other scheduler did, and he will do things because thinking that he's the only one on this node. So essentially every scheduler has to keep track of every other pod which was not handled by this particular scheduler. So that's what
that is what the default scheduler does today, and I think that's somewhat unavoidable because, for example, you need to know whether or not a node has available RAM or CPU, and those can be taken by an arbitrary pod as well.
Yeah, the problem is that today, or generally in Kubernetes API, other components, for example, if you take today's 1.11 Kubernetes, daemon set scheduler actually schedules pods. That's the node name of the pods itself. So this is done outside of the default scheduler, but default scheduler still handles those by receiving updates for all the pods, not necessarily only the pods.
Oh, okay. So essentially informer. So you just subscribe to that message, right, and then update your knowledge base, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you
I guess we will have to do the same thing. I thought maybe we can just the very short, the short-term solution could be partition the nodes depending on the scheduler, so that the certain scheduler work on certain nodes, but then you kind of limiting the whole cluster to.
Yeah, that is a possibility, but that I would call just a short term.
So I think that's the bigger effort for us. So we will have to do that. We have to put informer and extend our knowledge base to include things, because it's not just a matter of including things which were not processed by Firmament, because Firmament will go haywire. You say, I didn't do anything. What is this guy doing? So we need to kind of make sure it doesn't break or anything like that.
Right.
And again, I just wanted to. So it looks like we'll look into that. But one thing for sure, though, we need to address those storage SIG and the network SIG, why they break. They should not break.
I wonder if that has to do with the volume binder.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to look at, we just ran the numbers, but we need to look at the log file. I think so, yeah. So
Okay.
So yeah, I wouldn't be too much worried about those if other scheduling. I mean, we need to eventually address those, but we should make sure that firmament passes the scheduling test first, and then if all the scheduling tests pass, then we can think about some of those storage tests. Those are a little bit more complex. You may need to adopt part of the volume binding, dynamic volume binding logic of the scheduling.
well, the topology-based dynamic binding, obviously we're not going to address that. We don't need to. The one that recently went in. But I'm talking about the original dynamic volume binding, which was done 1.6. At least that should be.
Yeah.
That should be. I don't know. We have to look into it.
Okay. All right. We are out of time. Is there any other quick question or comments? All right. Thanks, everyone. See some of you folks next week. Bye.